Attorney, this is Holmes Building. Please ring Derek Tyler on leads 0113 284 3553. Thank you.
Hi, I don't know if you're there. This is ring up about the wages. Can you give me a ring at home? Okay, cheers, bye.
Hi, it's only me yet again. I just thought I'd ring you. Can you ring me as soon as you can? Bye.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. The morning after the discovery of the bodies of Patrick Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe, local and national newspapers started running stories about the backgrounds of the three dead men and speculating about what was going on. The Essex Police Press Office was besieged with calls from hacks who wanted to know if this was going to be the start of a massive gangland war in the country. If the dead men had been armed, how many shots had been fired? And most of all, if anyone had been arrested. The police were saying nothing, but there was so much background to write about they didn't need to. There was the link to Leah Betts, the attack on the pizza parlour man, the previous attempt on Tate's life, and even a celebrity angle thanks to Tucker's friendship with Nigel Benn. That afternoon, Dibley held a press conference where he answered a few questions, then produced Donna Jaggers to make a direct emotional appeal, an attempt to humanise the three men, who were already being typecast as mindless thugs. Weeping uncontrollably, Jaggers proved that at least someone cared about them.
Donna Jaggers, girlfriend of Craig Rolfe, today made an emotional appeal for any information that might help find the guilty.
I'd just like anyone who was with them maybe in the afternoon, who knows anything about what's happened to them, or if they see anything, to just come forward.
Fibres had been recovered, but with no control samples for comparison, they were worthless. There were a few unexplained footprints scattered around the scene, but as the lane was regularly used by local anglers, it didn't seem worth getting excited about. For a while, everyone thought the best lead would come from the 7 spent cartridges found on the ground by the car, but even they had come to nothing. Not only were all the cases clean of fingerprints, but they also turned out to be just about the most common brand of cartridge available. The chances of finding out where they were bought and therefore who had bought them was nil. As far as background information or details about the recent activities of the dead men were concerned, none of Tate or Tucker's relatives were willing to even have an informal chat. Then Dibley got his first break. It took a while for it to dawn on Donna Jaggers that she might hold the clue to tracking down Rolfe's killers. Her first instinct had been to protect herself and her child, to ensure that she said as little as possible for fear of implicating herself. She had, after all, been there when Kevin Whitaker was killed. She had been present at the many of Rolfe's drug deals, and she had witnessed firsthand the increasing tension between members of the gang in the weeks leading up to the killing. Most of all, she knew that Rolfe and others had been on their way to meet a man she only knew as Mickey the Pilot, on the night they died. Soon after the press conference, she made a new statement explaining everything she knew. It was less than 36 hours after the murder, and Dibley now had the name of his prime suspect. All he had to do now was find out who Mickey the Pilot actually was. I didn't know who or what I was dealing with, so I wanted to keep things pretty close to my chest. I was in the canteen at the police headquarters when I saw a friend who worked in criminal intelligence. I said to him, "You don't happen to know a pilot called Mickey?" He said, he did. "All right. Listen, at some stage, do you think you could let me have whatever you've got on him?" He said that he was just on his way to the office and that he'd get it for me then and there. That was just what I wanted. I didn't want to have to wait a week or even a weekend, but I had to make it look as casual as possible. Okay, so I'll just cut in here briefly, as this is something I've covered on a few occasions, but Just put yourself for one moment in Steele's position, or anybody who's planning any kind of criminal act, even far less than murder. Would you openly be inviting the person that you're going to kill to a meeting that evening? You're going to be telling them really basically what time they're going to be killed, where they're going to be killed, and who by. Because what happens the next day when the bodies are discovered? The police turn up at the relatives' house, the loved ones of these 3 deceased individuals. Oh, where was Pat going last night? Well, where was Craig going last night? Where was Tony going last night? All of these people, each of these 3 individuals, may well have told someone exactly who they were going to meet, where they were going that night. And lo and behold, who were they going to meet, according to Donna Jaggers, but Mickey the pilot. Not Mad Mick or whatever, Mick the Hat or Black Mick or whatever, Mickey the pilot. It just sticks out, doesn't it? It's a person that can fly planes. It's someone who flies stuff over. It's Mickey the pilot. It's not just Mickey, he's known as Mickey the pilot. Already you're getting this sort of, they're trying to narrow it down to this specific person, Mickey the pilot. It's not just Mickey Steele, Mickey is Mickey the pilot. Someone who flies planes, Michael Steele. Now, would anybody plan a murder like this? Would anyone say, okay, meet you at 6 o'clock, blah, 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 we're going to go down this lane, we're going to look at a field. Oh, no, after I've killed these 3 people, I hope they didn't tell anybody where they were going, This, when you even look at it like that, the fact that they were planning this big deal, the fact that Michael Steele's put forward this deal, he's put this deal on the table, knowing what these individuals were like, the fact that they were boasting about everything, the fact that even Steele supposedly heard that Tate was shouting his mouth off about killing him. Even just an instance like that tells you that these people can't be trusted with any kind of important information at all. So if Steele is originally luring them down there, with this promise of a deal and, this big consignment that's come in that they can rob, does he not honestly think that these 3 people, Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, are going to be telling all of their close friends, all of their girlfriends, their whatever, their bits on the side? They've even planned a meal for themselves and their girlfriends to celebrate the money they're going to make from this deal. The very deal, the very law that hasn't even taken place yet. They've already booked a table. There's a table booked for 4, 6 people. They're already ready to celebrate. They've already told their girlfriends where they're going. They've told them about what they're going to do that night. Now, when Tucker increases the booking, is that with Steele? Is that because they're inviting Steele along to this meal? Just imagine that. Imagine you're going to commit this triple murder and Tucker says to you, why don't you come for this meal? We're going to go and celebrate afterwards with our girlfriends. Are you not going to be thinking, right, okay, so when they don't turn up and they know that they're coming to meet me, what's going to happen then? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense at all. Even the most stupidest prat on earth isn't going to come up with surely not, a scheme like this, just to lure them down there. I mean, the worst thing he could have done, Steele, is to even create this whole idea about a deal, because he knows that they're going to start telling people. They're going to start telling people about this deal, the money they're going to be making, splashing the cash out, just like Tate did on December the 6th to Barry Dorman. Don't worry about this car I don't need, but don't worry, I'll come back and give you a couple of grand in the morning. I'm coming into a load of money. Would they not have thought about that? The whole fact that he's still supposedly created this big song and dance, this big deal, has just drawn a shitload of attention onto this, when really, if you're going to be committing this triple murder, you want to be keeping it low key. You don't want to be creating a big scene, a big event that's going to be happening, because what happens? Oh, they disappeared when they went down that lane. They had this big deal in the pipeline with Michael Steele. It doesn't make any sense. You're just drawing pure attention to yourself before you've even committed the murder. Anyway, I hope you can understand what I'm trying to get at there. The whole fact that Steele supposedly created this story. Now, I'm not here to say that he did or he didn't, but if he did, then that was a monumental, ridiculous mistake. By creating a big scene, you're just going to be creating more attention around that, around the whole event. people knowing about that event about to take place. You know, Donna Jagger's coming forward and saying, well, they've had this plan, you know, they're going to rip this firm off. Everyone's going to have known about it. And what happens when they go out and then go missing? Who are they going to come looking for? Oh, Michael Steele. Now, like I say, I'm not here to say that this is the way it went down or it didn't. But for someone to have done it like that, to have created such a massive event or big event for Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, even though it was supposedly untrue and pure fantasy, just giving them the idea that something big's going to happen. The fact they've even gone out and got a submachine gun for it. They may have even told the person they borrowed the gun off of what they were using it for, where they were going, who they planned to do this stuff with. And then what happens? They go down a cold, dark lane and go missing on the night that they were supposedly looking for a field or, you know, going for the deal itself. It's just drawing too much attention to yourself, far too much attention. That's why I personally believe there was some kind of deal that still was there at some point in time, but not involved directly in the murders. That's not to say he didn't lure them down the lane and there were other people waiting or whatever. But I feel that there was a legitimate reason, as far as, you know, not legitimate because it's still criminal, but a legitimate reason in terms of still being there other than just pure murder, because it doesn't make any sense for anyone who's planning the biggest event of their entire existence to make so many rudimentary, just terrible decisions. Personally, for me, doesn't make any sense. We're not talking about a dummy, a complete moron. We're talking about someone who's lived a life of crime to some degree, someone who's 55 years old or in their 50s, someone who's experienced. Not so much in murder, but he's an experienced criminal. Would you make so many basic errors when planning the biggest, most important event of your life? Anyway, let's continue from where I left off. As soon as Dibley saw the details of Steele's previous convictions, a possible motive for the killings, a drugs-related double-cross, became clear. But for the theory to work, there had to be some firm connection between Steele and the dead men. Did they live near each other? Did they ever work together? Did they socialise together? Did their girlfriends know each other? It's like working on a 1,000-piece jigsaw when you only have 50 pieces. Even if the stuff you have is all in the right place, it's still not making the picture at all. It's easy looking back with hindsight. You just think, well, they were all in prison together, it's obvious. But at the time, that's just one of dozens of possibilities. Everything you do in those early stages is pure guesswork. Even having an idea of where to look is no guarantee of success. Checking whether prisoners have served time together is no easy task, even for the police. Chelmsford Prison, for example, has 40 movements per day. Records are not always kept, and even if you find two prisoners in the same jail at the same time, you still need confirmation from staff or other prisoners before you can say for sure that they actually knew each other, particularly if they were serving on different wings. With neither Tucker or Rolfe having served much time, the connection with Steele had to be through Tate. And once it was established that the pair had been banged up together at Swaleside Prison throughout most of 1992, another clue was on the table. If Steele knew Tate, then it might well be Tate's behaviour that led to his death. 2 days after the murder, just as Ivan Dibley was beginning the task of identifying Mickey Steele's associates, a jumpy Darren Nichols received an unexpected visitor. I was just about to get in the bath when I heard the bell go. I almost jumped out of my skin. Since the murders, I'd been convinced the old Bill were going to come round at any time. When I opened up and saw it was Mally, this young gypsy bloke I'd seen around town, it was a real relief, but not for long. Someone told me you were looking to buy a shotgun, he said. I've got one in my van. Well, this was tricky. You have to remember that at the time, every single newspaper, every magazine, every TV bulletin and radio broadcast is about these three local blokes who have been brutally murdered, blasted in their car by some bloke with a shotgun. And then you have to remember that up until the day before that, I'd been asking everyone I knew, everyone, to get me a gun. I was really desperate for it. And now that gun had arrived, what I wanted to say was, no thanks mate, I don't need it anymore. But that would have been a bit of a giveaway. Okay, I said, great, I'll have a look. I went to the bloke's van and he opened up the back to show me this 9-shot single pump action shotgun with 3 cartridges, all in a brown plastic case. He wanted 350 quid for it. So I told him I'd just have to call a mate to check the price was right. Now, this is another part of the case that I find very suspicious. Now, I think there's every chance here that Darren Nichols actually planted this gun at Michael Steele's property. Remember that Michael Steele was not allowed to own a firearm. If he had actually committed this murder, would he then keep an illegal firearm at his property to potentially draw attention to himself, be arrested for something and then questioned about something else whilst he's in custody? Anything is a possibility. Why would you take the risk of having an illegal firearm stashed in your house? Something not quite right about this. The fact that Darren Nichols also chooses a traveller, a gypsy, to be the person who knocks on the door to try and sell him this weapon. Someone who you won't be able to trace. You won't be able to get in touch with this guy to check that Darren Nichols is telling the truth here, because it's a traveller, it's a gypsy. They're not going to be easy to track down, are they? He doesn't, even in Darren Nichols' statements, I think the actual guy's name's Matty, not Mally, but in the book here it's definitely Mally. But he says, I don't know, I just, he looks like they all do, young guy, youngish bloke. Very, very vague with the details, very non-committal on where this guy is, what his full name is. Just very vague in general. Now, if Nichols and one of his corrupt officer friends was trying to stitch Steele up potentially for these murders, then what better way to do it than to plant a weapon at his premises? I certainly think there's something dodgy about this whole purchasing of the shotgun, because if Steele got it, why did he keep hold of it? If Steele bought it off of this guy, why didn't he just destroy it like he did with the other weapons that supposedly killed Tucker, Tate and Rolfe? Ask yourself that question. It's also worth remembering, just before we continue, that it's only Darren Nichols who is the person that actually admits to being anywhere near the lane on December the 6th, and also the only person who openly admits here to trying to obtain a firearm. His choice of wording there is a little bit strange. I needed to get hold of a gun. I was desperate for it. He was just trying to get hold of a gun for Mick. It didn't seem like, he was ringing around every single person he knew. It's just, Mick just said, can you get a gun for me? Well, yeah, I'll ask my mate. I think he might have one, blah, blah, blah. And he rang a few friends. The fact there that he's saying I was desperate for it, I needed a gun, it just, very, very strange. So Darren Nichols is the only person that openly admits to trying to obtain a firearm and being close to the scene of the crime on the evening of December the 6th. Anyway, let's continue from where we left off. I slipped back indoors and phoned Mick. He agreed that the best way to avoid suspicion was to go ahead and buy it, and he promised he'd pay me back right away. As soon as Matty was out of sight, I drove over to Meadow Cottage. Mick wasn't around, so I took the gun and hid it in the barn behind some bamboo poles. Eventually, Mick turned up. I told him what I'd done, and he followed me into the barn. What happened next, I will never forget. Mick took the gun out of the case, took out 3 cartridges and slowly pushed them one by one into the magazine of the gun. Then he started playing around with it, tossing it from one hand to another to test its weight and balance. The gun was spinning around all over the place, but every now and then it ended up pointing directly at my head. And all the time I was standing there thinking, how did I let myself get into such a stupid situation? Eventually Mick unloaded the gun and put it back in its case. It was only when I got back into my van to drive home and couldn't get the key in the ignition because my hands were shaking so much that I realised just how scared I'd been. Bill Davidson knew Michael Steele of old. A long-serving member of the National Investigation Service of Customs and Excise, he had been one of the leading lights behind Operation Waterski, the large-scale customs investigation that had resulted in Steele being sent to prison in 1989. After hearing of his release on parole in 1994, Davidson knew it was only a matter of time before Steele tried to get back into the game. It was nothing more than a hunch, based on Steele's love of smuggling for the adrenaline kick as much as for the money, so there was nothing to justify a surveillance operation there and then. But Davidson carefully ensured that any bits of information that related to Steele, his activities and associates were compiled and coordinated on a regular basis. Davidson's hunch was proved right, when Steele was arrested along with Womes and Corey at Felixstowe Ferry in November 1995. Although there hadn't been enough evidence to press charges, it was blindingly obvious what the trio had been up to. A boatload of cannabis had been brought over from Belgium, landed somewhere on the Essex or Suffolk coast, and then Steele had gone back out to sea and brought his boat back in at the marina. Okay, so I'll just cut in again here as this is quite a relevant point. Now, Bill Davidson, this guy from Customs and Excise, he had clearly been involved in some kind of Operation Waterski, which sent Michael Steele to prison back in 1989. Now, a lot of people will say, well, you know, Steele was a very low-level importer. He wasn't really on the radar of the police or Customs and Excise. But it just goes to show that Steele certainly was a target, at least for Customs and Excise. Even when he came out of prison in the 90s, they were still keeping an eye on his activities, what he was getting up to. And then Steele had the close brush in November 1995 with Jack Womes, where they were almost caught bringing in the dud consignment from Holland. I think it's also really this point in time where you can either go one of two ways with Michael Steele. You may be of the opinion that after his close brush with Customs in November 1995, that he would feel almost untouchable. There would be a level of arrogance, a level of cockiness, even as far as to think that he could get away with something such as murder. But then you could also take a look at it from the opposite end of the spectrum. Would this make Michael Steele naturally more cautious, more concerned that there was possibly a rat in the camp, that someone had grasped on him and Jack Womes, that they were bringing this stuff in and there were people there waiting for them? This wasn't simply a coincidence. Someone had grasped him up. Now, what we know of Steele is that he was someone who was paranoid about being under surveillance. He had anti-bugging devices. He would often speak to Darren Nichols about mobile phones and being concerned that the police could listen into his calls. Now, after Steele and Womes had had this close encounter with Customs in November 1995, would there not be something in the back of Michael Steele's mind possibly telling him that he may be under surveillance during this time period? How else would Customs have known that he was going to be bringing in this consignment? There must have been a level of anxiety there for Michael Steele. Then ask yourself, would you then 1 month later, just 4 weeks after nearly being caught bringing this consignment in from Holland, would you then go ahead and kill 3 individuals? Anyway, let's continue from where we left off. When the boat was finally returned to Jack Womes, it was, after all, he who said he owned it, Davidson learned it was being stored in a garage at G&T Commercials, the dockside haulage firm in Ipswich where Womes worked as a freelance mechanic looking after the company's vehicles. The boat was clearly the key to Steele's smuggling activities, so Davidson decided to assign a team to keep the premises under watch and issue an alert to ports and airports to look out for any new trips abroad. The first few weeks yielded little of interest as far as the boat was concerned, though a report from Harwich showed that Steele had made a ferry trip to the Hook of Holland along with Darren Nichols around the 15th of November. A few days after the Rettendon murders, Davidson was preparing to submit plans to his superiors asking for the operation to be stepped up when a call came in from the Essex police explaining that Michael Steele was the #1 suspect in the triple killings. An urgent meeting was arranged, and it was quickly agreed that the police investigation should take priority and that they would put Steele and some of his associates under round-the-clock surveillance. If the police came across anything that indicated that the target was planning another smuggling trip, Customs would immediately be brought in. By the same token, Customs agreed to pass on all their information regarding Steele and his associates and keep the police informed of any movements through ports and airports. Less than 2 weeks after Steele had committed what he considered to be the near-perfect murder, the net was starting to close in. If you would like to learn more about the Range Rover murders, then click on the video in front of you now. You will also see the Essex Boys playlist, which has all of the videos concerning this case in one convenient folder. Many thanks for joining me for this video. I look forward to seeing you all again for the next one. Take care. Cheers.